Good morning, class. This is Mr. Harris, and this week we're looking at the geography of China. We only have a couple weeks left of new material, and I thought it was really important that we get to China before we leave for the school year. So this week and next week will mostly be about that country in particular. So here is our satellite view of China from space. There might be some features on here you guys will already recognize. We see down in the south, we've got the Himalayas, which are also going to be a border region for China, keeping it from going into Nepal and India. We've also got over here, these islands are Japan. This is South Korea. That is North Korea. Down here, we have the mighty country of Taiwan. Okay. And then this all is China. Okay. Now, China is broken up into a lot of different regions or provinces, like we have states here inside the United States, with the more populous regions and provinces being on the East Coast, the least populous ones being on the western side of the country. I do want to remind you guys, I have spent time in China. I lived there for a year, and I live down in Shanghai, which is the biggest city in China, about 25 million people, over here on the East Coast. Now, China and the United States have actually a lot in common in some ways. They're almost exactly the same size. If we include the Great Lakes as being part of the United States, USA is bigger. If not, China is bigger. And this is the USA laid over China. We can see that China is actually a little bit more southern than the United States, but this northern region here is very cold, okay, very dry and very cold in the part of China that connects to Mongolia. Now, again, we're very close in size, 3.7 versus 3.6 million square miles. Their biggest physical barriers, the Himalayas, we have the Rockies. They have a bunch of rivers. They have the Yangtze, the Yellow River. We have the Mississippi River. Their river systems usually run east-west. Ours run north and south. Most of our populations are both on the East Coast. And their big connectivity problem is between the North and South. In the United States, it's between the East and West because of those Rocky Mountains. Now, again, here's just another map of China. You can see all its neighbors on here. I want to point out Beijing is the capital city up here in the north. Pretty cold part of the year, but does have hot summers there as well. Shanghai is kind of the industrial center of, or the finance center of China. Down here we have Guangzhou, which is a lot of manufacturing is done, and then Hong Kong, which is a international-ish city. It is owned by China, and Macau, which used to be a province of Portugal. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the land itself. Even though China is a huge country, their land is not as good as the land inside the United States. And we see when we look at the breakdown of what percentage their land is make up, about a third of their land is mountains. Then we have these plateaus, it's another quarter of their land. And most of these plateaus are in Tibet, where it is relatively cold and dry, not good farming regions. We do have some good basins and some plains as well as some hills, but a lot of mountain land that takes away a lot of the good agricultural land for China. So cultivated land, this means land where people are actually having farms, and we can see it's mostly in the east, okay, especially in this central area here. When I look at this outline of China, I always think it looks like a rooster. So here's the rooster's heads up here, here's its tail back there, its chest. So you see right on the rooster's chest, especially a little bit to the head, we have our farmland, and in the far east, we have very little, excuse me, the far west, very little farmland. Now, I put these two graphs up here, just comparing the United States and China, how easy it is for them to make food compared to us. Now, they have 4 times as many people as the United States does, and they have to feed all those people. Unfortunately, they cannot. Now, they do put a lot of things into their country to try to make them produce more, including we see here herbicide consumption, pesticide, insecticide, fungicide. These are all things to kill pests. Those are all much, much higher than they are in the United States, and they use a lot more of these things than we do. They use about 5 pounds of pesticide per mile, as we do in the United States, which is only 1 pound. Again, a lot more fertilizer they have to use. All this stuff is not good for them in the long run. And then we see we have more arable land. Our population of farmers is a little bit, it's a lot smaller than theirs. A lot of them are still poor farmers. We also have better water supplies as well. So we are not equal as far as our ability to produce food out of that arable land. We do have a bunch of bodies of water in China. Obviously, we got what's called the Sea of Japan, the Yellow Sea, the South China Sea, and then we've got a bunch of rivers. The one in the middle is the Yangtze. We got the Pacific Ocean, the Amur up there in the north, the Honghua or the Yellow River, which is the more northern river, and then the Z River, which is the more southern river. Okay, so our river systems, unfortunately, have a lot of pollution in them. All that fertilizer, all that manufacturing, oftentimes those products wash into our river basins and make them not the best place to get your fresh water from. Yangtze River is very, very famous in China. Here's an old historical painting of it. We also got some deserts and plateaus, the biggest one being the Tibetan Plateau in the east, all this elevated land, excuse me, the west. The Taklamakan Desert, which is a very harsh border. The Gobi Desert in the north, above next to Mongolia. And in China, the southern part of China is almost tropical, especially the very bottom in Henan. You could say that's tropical down there. And the north is much colder, more temperate. And then we have in the west these cool temperate zones, very arid as well. Okay. Now, China does not have all the minerals they would like to have. And the big one they're missing out on is oil. They do have a lot of coal, which we'll talk about. They do use a lot of that, but they don't have as much oil as they would need, or iron, or things like that. So when China is manufacturing things, they often rely on trading with their neighbors from around the world, especially Australia, which brings a lot of their natural resources, as well as the United States. Now, in China, their number one fuel usage is coal. Coal is very cheap, it's very abundant, and it's very dirty. It's disgusting, okay, when you burn coal to make electricity. And we have very high pollution problems in China caused by this coal. Now, they do use a lot of oil, about 19%, and then we have a little bit of some of our biofuels and nuclear and hydro. However, they're investing very deeply in these energy sources to try to fix some of their pollution problems. Okay. Now, China up there at the top gets all this oil from the Middle East and a little bit from Venezuela, though Venezuela is messing up rather quickly. So they're very dependent on these oil production straits. Currently, the United States kind of guards the shipping lanes for oil. But if the United States suddenly decided not to do that, and Iran and Saudi Arabia went to war, almost all of China's oil production would be cut off, and then their manufacturing would fail as well. So, as a percentage of the world population, China's about a quarter of the world. Okay, so about 1 in 4, 1 in 5 people in the world are Chinese. India is next, the country we learned about the last couple of weeks. And then after that, you have to compare continents, really. If you add it, the next biggest countries, America, Indonesia, Pakistan, Brazil, they don't even get to the size of China. Okay. Over time, we see that China will grow, but not that much. They've had this one-child policy, which I wish we had some more time in class to talk about, but their population is slowing down their growth rates, and they'll soon be surpassed by India. Okay. Now, their population has always been relatively big, but then especially when the Columbian Exchange and all those new food products like potatoes and corn got brought over to China, their population started exploding upward. Okay. Most of the people, again, live on the eastern coast. The western half of China is relatively unpopulated.